Tonight we explore the oddly soothing world of medieval medicine, specifically, why physicians back then were absolutely obsessed with leeches. Picture this, it's the middle of the 14th century, the cobblestones are wet from last night's rain, the streets reek of smoke and something vaguely fishy, and you've just come down with a very suspicious ache in your lower back. It's probably plague. Or maybe gout. Either way, you're in trouble, and your best hope is a man with questionable hygiene, zero anesthesia, and a pouch full of tiny vampires. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up shivering in a straw mattress, your breath visible in the damp morning air. The year is 1347, and your village is buzzing because someone died last night after seeing the local physician. You, meanwhile, have a splitting headache, your joints ache, and your mouth tastes like iron and despair. Your mother thinks it's a punishment from God. Your neighbor blames the wind. But you've summoned the town's medical authority. He arrives wearing a long robe with soot stains and something that might be dried soup on the sleeve. His beard is glorious in a tangled, ominous sort of way. He nods solemnly as you describe your symptoms, then holds up a polished brass basin and instructs you to spit in it. You oblige, trying not to look at the last bits of porridge floating in your saliva. He peers into it like it's a crystal ball. Ah, your humors are imbalanced. Now, this isn't just a fun medieval catchphrase. This is the foundational idea behind most pre-modern European medicine. You've got 4 fluids sloshing around inside you: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and if they're not perfectly balanced, you're toast. Or at least, you're going to have a very bad day. So, what does our good doctor do? He opens a leather pouch, and inside are leeches. Not 1 or 2. Dozens. Glimmering, slick, and possibly humming with anticipation. You don't scream, because that's not the polite thing to do, but you do start mentally preparing your will, just in case. He takes one between 2 fingers, murmurs something about the moon's position, and places it just under your jawline. You flinch, naturally. It latches on with the enthusiasm of a toddler attacking a juice box. You feel a pinch, then a strange cooling sensation, then, surprisingly, a little relief. Maybe it's the blood loss. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe it's denial. Historians still argue whether the placebo effect played a role in patients' perceived improvement after bloodletting. But let's not pretend you're the only one getting leeched in this era. Across the town square, someone's having a leech attached to their temple for excessive thinking. Down the road, a butcher is draining his own blood to cure his chronic bad dreams. And over in the abbey, a monk is writing in a dusty manuscript about the miracle of removing inner heat by letting out just a few ounces of sanguine humor. The medical theory behind all of this. Basically, if you're sick, something inside you needs to come out. Blood is usually the first suspect. Feeling hot. Too much blood. Sluggish. Blood. Rash on your arm. Also blood. Pretty much everything is too much blood. And so, you lie there, woozy and pale, while 3 or 4 little worms do their thing on your neck, arm, and behind your knee. The doctor nods in satisfaction. This is working. You, however, are trying not to pass out into your soup basin. At this point, you might be wondering, were these physicians trying to help? And the answer is, oddly enough, yes. These weren't malicious people. They were operating within the best medical framework available to them at the time, a framework built on ancient Greek and Roman texts, many of which were passed down through Arabic scholars and then retranslated, poorly, most of the time, into Latin. The go-to authority? Galen, a Roman physician who believed in the balance of humors like it was the periodic table of elements. Medieval medicine basically just ran with Galen's ideas for over 1,000 years. If Galen said that bloodletting cured fevers, then leeches became the medieval equivalent of ibuprofen. Now, just to keep things spicy, physicians didn't always agree on the best way to let blood. Some preferred cutting veins. Others liked cupping. But most agreed that leeches were the safest method, because they only took just enough. Unless they didn't. But more on that later. Back to your bedside. After about 20 minutes, your leeches have gorged themselves. They now resemble small sausages with little faces, and one lets out what you swear is a burp. The doctor carefully removes them, tucking them back into the pouch where they'll digest your blood and possibly be reused on someone else tomorrow. Hygiene was not exactly trending in 1347. The bleeding continues for a bit, it tends to, after leech bites. Your doctor presses a ball of wool soaked in vinegar to the wounds and mutters a short prayer. You, meanwhile, wonder if this was all a very vivid dream. Maybe you just needed water. Maybe a nap. Too late. The damage is done. You're lighter by several ounces of blood and an entire afternoon. But strangely, you do feel calmer. Not healthier, exactly, but floatier. Leeches were so standard at this time that many towns had people whose only job was to collect them from streams and swamps. They were known, creatively, as leech gatherers. Their legs were often permanently scarred from letting the little guys latch on. The best leeches, according to law, came from clean rivers, ate only noble blood, and refused peasants. That last part is definitely folklore, but it's also weirdly believable, right? Still, not everyone thought this was a good idea. Even then, some healers raised eyebrows at the sheer enthusiasm with which leeches were being used. Some scholars even whispered that letting too much blood could weaken the body's natural defenses. But their voices were drowned out by centuries of tradition and a surprisingly loud gurgling sound coming from your physician's pouch. You drift off to sleep with gauze on your neck, a vague understanding of humor theory in your head, and the unsettling knowledge that if you sneeze too hard, someone might try to bleed you again. You wake up groggy, but at least you're alive. That's already a decent score for 1347. The air smells of burnt herbs and wet wool, and your bandages are soaked through, slightly crusty at the edges. Your physician returns, clutching a wax tablet and a look of intellectual pride, like he just solved a math riddle no one asked him to. He's been reviewing your case and, after careful consideration, he declares your issue is, brace yourself, too much black bile. Yes, black bile. One of the 4 legendary bodily fluids you didn't even know you had until yesterday. This stuff supposedly pools in your spleen and makes you melancholic, moody, and possibly poetic. If you've been sad, slow-moving, or prone to sighing dramatically while staring into the middle distance, congratulations, your bile's out of whack. Here's the rundown of your inner orchestra. According to Hippocratic tradition, your body is basically a soup of blood, which is warm and moist, perfect for those with a cheerful, energetic vibe. Phlegm, which is cold and moist, great if you enjoy being calm, pale, and suspiciously silent. Yellow bile, hot and dry, fueling passion, ambition, and the occasional irrational tantrum. Black bile, cold and dry, the stuff of deep thinkers, brooding poets, and guys who stare too long into wells. The goal of medieval medicine? Balance these 4 in such a perfect harmony that you essentially become the Beyoncé of your village. When you're sick, that means one humor has gone rogue. In your case, Your doctor says black bile is dominating your system like an edgy teen who just discovered eyeliner and existential dread. Naturally, the solution is not therapy or a better diet, it's more bloodletting. Because here's the medieval logic twist: even though black bile is your main offender, physicians believed they could drain the excess by targeting your blood. Think of it as trying to fix a broken faucet by letting water out of the bathtub. Leeches, the multi-tool of medieval medicine, come out again. This time, he places one behind your ear. Not because it's infected, but because medieval physicians had a wild system of zones, areas of the body associated with particular humors and ailments. Got liver trouble? Bleed near your elbow. Headache? Temple. Melancholy? Anywhere near the ears, apparently. It's like acupuncture, but wetter and with way more hissing jars. Your blood, the doctor explains as the leech latches on, is the river of your soul. But too much river drowns the spirit. You nod sagely, mostly because you're too tired to argue. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians genuinely believed in this system or were just doing their best with what little biology they understood. After all, the theory of humors had been passed down for centuries, mingling with astrology, theology, and pure guesswork. To challenge it was to challenge the entire fabric of medical training. So instead of questioning why leeches were the answer to everything, they got creative with how and when to use them. And timing mattered. A lot. Many doctors swore by treating illnesses during specific moon phases. A waxing moon meant drawing blood to energize the body. A waning moon suggested expelling poisons. Treating your melancholy? Best wait for Saturn to be in a favorable house. Your physician tells you today is ideal for bloodletting because it's Tuesday, and Mars is ascendant over Aries, whatever that means. You just want your headache gone. Then there's the element of personality typing. You as a patient might even be labeled melancholic, sanguine, choleric, or phlegmatic based on your humor balance. Each type came with its own traits. If you were melancholic, people might assume you were introspective, artistic, and deeply unwell. Fun times. To offset your black bile, your doctor recommends a simple regimen: more bleeding, naturally, eating boiled cabbage, avoiding sex, too destabilizing, praying twice daily to Saint Dymphna, the patron of mental distress, and maybe applying a paste of warm fig and vinegar to the soles of your feet. This is real advice. And somehow, you don't question it. One lesser-known remedy he suggests, just in case the leeches don't help, is sleeping with a carved gemstone under your pillow. Preferably amethyst. Supposedly, it realigns the humors through vibrational balance. Today, that would be called crystal healing. Back then, it was considered hard science. Still, not everyone in your village is sold on the humor theory. There's the herbalist near the edge of town. People whisper she learned from a Moorish traveler. She speaks of spirits in the blood and has started brewing teas to cool the inner fire instead of bleeding it out. The physician calls her a fraud. But the villagers, they visit her when the leeches don't work. And to be fair, the leeches don't always work. If your black bile is actually a symptom of anemia, depression, or the onset of the plague, draining more blood isn't going to help. It might actually make things worse. But medieval logic had an answer for that, too. If the patient dies, it's because the illness was too strong, not because the treatment failed. You sigh as another leech gets dropped onto your forearm. This one is sluggish, clearly full from someone else's bad day. The physician grumbles, swaps it out for a fresh one, and mutters about needing to find a new bog to harvest from. He doesn't seem malicious, though. Just determined. You start to think of him as more of a blood gardener than a healer. Tending your humors like hedges, trimming back whatever grows too wild. The idea is oddly comforting. As you drift back into a half-nap, your thoughts swirl like incense smoke. Why did this black bile choose you? Are you doomed to melancholy? Will you ever get back to your duties? Should you have seen the herbalist instead? Maybe. But for now, you're just trying not to twitch too much while a worm drinks your essence from the side of your neck. You're not left alone for long. The next morning, before you've even shaken the fog from your head, there's a knock at your door. Well, more of a tap-tap with a crooked walking stick, followed by the clink of glass bottles and something sloshing wetly in a pouch. Your physician is back, and this time, he's brought reinforcements. You meet your medical dream team. They file into your tiny room like actors entering stage left, murmuring holy phrases and trailing the scent of garlic, rosemary, and someone's breakfast ale. There's your original physician, of course, who at this point you think might live under your bed. Then there's a novice monk with a satchel of handwritten scrolls, a nervous apprentice carrying what looks like a homemade anatomical dummy stuffed with rags, and, in a place of great honor, a woman with inky fingers and a stern look who introduces herself as an apothecary. Your eyes dart to the satchel. Inside, polished bone tools, color-coded herbs in knotted cloth, and a carefully labeled jar of dried lizard. The apothecary notices your stare. Good for spleen grumbling, she mutters flatly. But front and center is that squirming leather pouch. The leeches are back, and they're not thrilled to be awake. They writhe with slow, deliberate menace, bumping into the pouch walls like confused commuters in a crowded subway. Your physician opens it as gently as one would a jewelry case, selects two of the more ambitious wrigglers, and holds them up to the light like prized antiques. These ones, he says, fed on a cannon of St. Albans just last week. They've a refined taste now. You nod, not entirely sure if that's a good thing or if you're about to become their palate cleanser. One of the monks unwraps a painted chart, an elaborate will showing what part of the body to bleed for which ailment, overlaid with celestial signs and color-coded organs. You're fascinated and slightly dizzy just looking at it. It seems there's a right time of day to bleed the ankle for kidney woes, and a completely different hour to drain the temple for insomnia. And if Mercury's in retrograde, better not touch a vein. The physician peers at your tongue, sniffs your breath, and consults a urine chart. Yes, a chart. It's made of vellum, meticulously drawn with different shades of yellow and brown. He holds up your clay pot of freshly collected urine to the morning light and squints at it with the intensity of someone evaluating fine wine. Golden but cloudy. With a hint of bile, he concludes, which is apparently not a compliment. Your diagnosis? Still melancholic. Still black bile. But now they think your liver might be drying. This, by the way, is not a measurable medical condition, it's more of a poetic observation. A dry liver could mean anything from dehydration to overwork to existential gloom. But it does mean more leeches. This time, they decide to apply them to your thighs. You're not given much time to protest. The apprentice steps forward, awkwardly holding a pewter dish, and you brace yourself as the physician carefully positions the leeches. Their cold little mouths latch on again, and you flinch. Leeches, if you haven't noticed by now, are surprisingly strong. They suck with purpose, and once they're locked in, they're not going anywhere unless bribed, poked, or subjected to vinegar breath. As the leeches get to work, the apothecary dabs your forehead with a linen cloth soaked in rose water and mutters something about heat rising to your head. She's scribbling notes with a goose quill dipped in ink that smells vaguely of mushrooms. You try to focus on the conversation around you, which is a mix of medical speculation and casual gossip. I bled a merchant last week, the apprentice says brightly. From both elbows. Laughed the whole time, said he'd never felt clearer in the head. Or dizzier, the monk murmurs dryly. Even among your well-meaning visitors, there's the faintest tension. The monk occasionally side-eyes the apothecary, who in turn raises an eyebrow every time the physician mutters about humors. There's quiet competition here, each believes their own method is most reliable. The physician has his books, the monk his scripture, the apothecary her jars, and the apprentice, mostly hope. Historians still argue whether such collaborations were harmonious partnerships or barely contained turf wars. Some records describe physicians accusing monks of prideful guesswork, while monks accused physicians of chasing vanity over healing. Apothecaries were somewhere in the middle, part chemist, part witch, part small business owner. But for now, the team is united by one goal: balance your body. After about an hour, the leeches detach themselves, their stomachs bloated and glossy. The physician flicks one gently, it drops off with a wet plop and lands in the dish. He hums approvingly. They've taken enough for today. You're too woozy to argue. The apprentice sprinkles powdered sage on your wounds to help stop the bleeding. The monk lays a hand on your shoulder and prays in Latin. The apothecary offers you a boiled turnip and tells you not to move until you feel your colors return. As they pack up their tools and rigolers, you catch a glimpse of a small silver bell tied to the leech pouch. It jingles softly as the bag swings, a strangely delicate sound for a container of bloodthirsty worms. You wonder, briefly, how often they reuse these leeches. Then you decide not to ask. One last moment, the physician turns at the door, holds up a scroll, and says he'll return tomorrow. They want to try a hot compress with foxglove. You're not sure whether that's medicine or a potion. Either way, you nod. Alone again, you lie back, staring at the wooden beams above you, the candle flickering in the corner, and your bandaged thighs. There's a strange comfort in all this attention, even if it's attention from people who believe that your mood swings are the result of lunar tides pulling on imaginary fluids in your guts. You close your eyes and, for the first time all day, fall asleep before the next weird thing can happen. You wake to the sound of dripping, soft, rhythmic, and oddly soothing. It takes a few moments to realize it's not rain, but blood, your blood, trailing from a cloth on your side and soaking slowly into a wooden bowl. A leech must have been forgotten. Still attached. Well, that's one way to greet the morning. You pluck the bloated little guy off and flick him gently into an empty cup nearby, where he squishes in with a satisfied blorp. He seems fine. You, on the other hand, are down at least half a pint and feeling like a medieval raisin. You shift carefully and catch a glimpse of your reflection in a brass dish. Your skin has taken on a romantic shade of sick candle, and your lips look like they've been lightly dusted with chalk. But your physician would probably say you're looking better. Less blood means less imbalance. Right. Here's where things get weird. Well, weirder. Because now the treatment shifts away from the leeches themselves and dives deep into the why leeches were ever considered medical marvels in the first place. You see, it's not just about their appetite. Medieval thinkers believed the leech was spiritually connected to purification. It wasn't just a worm, it was a divine tool. The act of leeching was seen as not just physical healing, but moral cleansing. Your sins, your excesses, your impure thoughts, sucked out by a humble, slippery vessel of God's will. You start to wonder what exactly that last leech got out of you. That idea of illness being tied to morality ran deep. People weren't just unwell, they were unbalanced, impure, or under judgment. A fever might be punishment for pride. Coughing blood, possibly divine wrath for gluttony. And melancholy, your particular ailment, was often seen as a kind of spiritual stagnation, a soul weighed down by past sin or inner corruption. The leech, then, wasn't just healing your body, it was chewing on your guilt. Leech even became a nickname for greedy priests and lawyers. Yes, the metaphor was that obvious. These little creatures embodied both healing and taking. But paradoxically, they were respected, even loved, for it. A leech didn't just drain you. It gave you a second chance. You remember how reverently the physician handled his pouch, like it was full of relics. Some even believed leeches had a kind of built-in wisdom, instinctively knowing which bad blood to take. You'd laugh, but it kind of sounds like something people say about therapy dogs now. Historians still argue whether this reverence was genuine, or just a way to justify painful treatments. Maybe people needed the leech to be sacred because otherwise they'd have to admit they were letting glorified worms suck their veins dry for reasons no one fully understood. But the rituals made it real. Before each application, your physician often whispered a prayer, not just to steady his hands, but to invite the leech to do holy work. In some monasteries, monks even fasted before bloodletting sessions, believing that a cleansed body made for better healing. That's dedication, considering the average monk's diet consisted of barley stew and bitter ale. And then there were the songs. Yes, actual songs. In certain towns, especially in France and northern Italy, bloodletting days were treated like mini-festivals. The local barber surgeon would set up a stool in the village square. People would gather, sometimes with music in the background. Children would watch. Jokes would be made. Songs would be sung about the Red River, about washing away darkness, about becoming clean again. You try to imagine that happening today. Probably not in your local pharmacy. The barbers were some of the most prolific leeches. That striped red and white pole we associate with barbershops today, that came from the bloodletting days, where patients would grip a pole tightly during the process, and the red stripe represented the blood, the white the bandages. It's weirdly poetic, and definitely a lot more intense than asking for a fade and a shave. You're interrupted from your musings by a soft creak. The door swings open. It's not your doctor this time. It's the apothecary. She walks in without a word, sets down her basket, and begins grinding something in a wooden mortar. You recognize rosemary, wormwood, and wait, is that onion? You ask, tentatively, what this new mixture is for. She glances up. Leech wounds are slow to close. This helps tighten the skin and cool the fever. You nod. She pauses, then adds, also scares off lice. A bonus, then. She dabs the paste onto your open marks with practiced fingers. The sensation is oddly cooling, tingling, but not unpleasant. As she works, she begins to talk. You know, she says, there's a leech farm 3 valleys over. A proper one. They keep them in stone pools, feed them goose blood. Very high quality. You blink. That sounds oddly luxurious. You imagine pampered leeches in little spa tubs, sipping from golden goblets of foul juice. Some say those ones know the difference between noble blood and peasant, she continues. Won't latch onto just anyone. You can't help but laugh. Even leeches had standards. But the idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. In medieval thought, not all blood was equal. Nobles were believed to have thinner, more refined blood, easier to balance, more prone to overheating. Peasants, with their heavier labor and saltier diets, were thought to have thicker, more sluggish blood. So yes, it wasn't uncommon for leeches to prefer noble clients, not just for the coin, but for the superior quality of their fluids. You ask her if that's why yours won't stop bleeding. She doesn't answer. but she does smirk. The apothecary packs up her things, leaves a little vial of herbal tonic by your bed, and tells you to drink it at twilight. It helps the blood remember where it belongs, she says, cryptically. Then she's gone. You're left alone again, the candlelight flickering, the dried blood on your side starting to itch. You think about everything you've learned, that your sadness might be tied to the moon, that worms can heal, that leech selection is possibly a classist affair. You're not sure what's more surreal, the treatments, or the sincere belief behind them. And still, somehow, you're feeling lighter. Whether it's placebo, or just blood loss, or the onion paste doing divine work, you close your eyes with a strange, sleepy gratitude. Your dreams that night are a patchwork of feathers, leeches, monks singing off-key, and a spinning urine wheel. When you wake, the world feels slightly tilted, as if your bed has taken on a soft slope and your thoughts are trailing behind your eyes. Your physician is already back. How does he keep getting in? Today, he looks energized, his robes smelling of lavender and candle soot. He's carrying a thick book with cracked leather binding, which he sets beside your pillow with a reverent thud. This, he announces, is the canon of medicine. You blink slowly. It sounds important. He smiles. It was written by Avicenna. A genius. Persian. Brilliant. Liked camels. You're not sure how camel preference factors in, but you nod respectfully anyway. He flips the book open to a dog-eared page. Here, he says, pointing at a hand-drawn diagram of veins and dots. Avicenna called bloodletting the art of liberation. Not punishment. Not superstition. But release. It's a noble rebrand, really sounding more like emotional therapy than exsanguination. You glance at the page. The notes in the margins are in 4 different handwritings. Some are in Latin. One, suspiciously, appears to be a shopping list. But the central idea is clear: leeches, and bleeding in general, weren't just desperate guesses. They were rooted in a grand, ancient science. You're about to ask a question when your physician interrupts, clearly on a roll. Avicenna believed that each humor had a season. Blood, spring. Phlegm, winter. Yellow bile, summer. Black bile, autumn. Do you see it? You nod, because honestly, who wants to debate a man who brings his own book club to your bedside? The body, he continues, is a garden. And like a garden, it must be pruned, cut, tended. You wonder if that makes you the hedge. He launches into a speech about the flow of humors, the necessity of periodic cleansing, and how certain personalities are shaped by dominant fluids. You, being melancholic, are clearly a child of Saturn, introspective, quiet, prone to poetry and constipation. Very noble, he assures you. But dangerous in excess. Too much stillness leads to stagnation. That is why we bleed. This is the part where things take a turn for the dramatic. He closes the book with a flourish and orders a basin of warm water, herbs, and lemon peel. Not for tea, this is your pre-bleed soak, apparently to loosen the veins. Your forearm is swaddled like a spa guest, and after a few minutes, a leech is carefully applied just below the bend of your elbow. It doesn't take long. You feel the familiar pinch, followed by that odd tugging sensation, like someone slurping soup at a polite distance. As it feeds, your physician hums a tune. Something lilting and slightly annoying. You try to focus on the book. Avicenna's influence wasn't limited to the Islamic world. His writings were translated into Latin and swept through European universities like wildfire, shaping medical training for centuries. The fact that he promoted bloodletting strategically and with diagrams gave it a kind of intellectual legitimacy. It wasn't just folklore anymore. It was science. Old science. But science nonetheless. Historians still argue whether Avicenna truly believed in leeches as a primary tool or simply included them because everyone else did. Some of his descriptions are quite skeptical. He preferred surgical bleeding and saw leeches as a gentler alternative for the weak. But once his name was tied to the method, that was enough. Your leech finally drops off, full and plump. The physician scoops it into a wooden jar marked with the initials of your name. Yes, they're keeping track. Some believe that reusing your own leech maintains balance, letting it learn your body. You can't decide if that's horrifying or endearing. After the treatment, you're encouraged to sit upright. The apprentice arrives with a warm cloth and a bowl of thin broth that tastes like regret and moss. Still, it's comforting in a weird way. Your head is lighter. Your limbs, slightly looser. Then comes the real surprise. Your physician pulls out a map. Not of the kingdom, but of your body. A rough sketch he's been drawing over the last few days. Circles mark where you've been bled. Dotted lines suggest places for future application. It's half art project, half strategy game. You're now a medical campaign. He points at your shoulder. Tomorrow, here. Full mood. We'll avoid the temples for now. Last time I tried that on a farmer, he couldn't see straight for a week. You swallow and try not to imagine that. You ask him if he's ever been leeched himself. He nods solemnly. Twice a year. Spring and autumn. Preventative. There it is again, that garden metaphor. Like tilling soil. You get the impression that, for him, leeching isn't an emergency measure. It's self-care. Like yoga. But with blood. Before he leaves, he pats your arm and tells you he's proud. You've taken to the process with humility. That is rare. You're about to protest that you've mostly just been lying here while strange people poke you with worms and tell you you're too Saturnian, but, honestly, you'll take the compliment. The room quiets again. The only sound is the soft rustling of the leeches in their jar. You study your arm. The bite mark looks like a tiny apostrophe. You think of Avicenna, his garden body, his humors, his seasons. You wonder what he'd make of modern hospitals. Probably a lot of questions. Probably not enough lemon peel compresses for his taste. Still, something in his theory sticks with you. The idea that illness isn't just a malfunction, but a rhythm out of sync. And the leech. Maybe just the metronome bringing it back in time. By now, you've developed a kind of camaraderie with the leeches. Not friendship, exactly, you're not naming them or writing sonnets, but a mutual understanding. You provide the blood. They do, whatever it is they do. It's a relationship based on quiet toleration, like roommates who don't speak but respect shared fridge space. Today, though, your physician seems especially excited. He's practically vibrating as he opens his pouch and reveals a new specimen. Hirudo orientalis, he announces, like he's just pulled a pearl from the ocean. Imported. Hungarian bred. Very aggressive. You eye it warily. Aggressive isn't a word you usually want near your bloodstream. He explains that this leech is a different breed from the usual Hirudo medicinalis. Larger, hungrier, and faster. This one, he says with a conspiratorial tone, treats hysteria. You're about to say you're not hysterical, but the thing is already latched onto your neck. It's surprisingly painless. Cold, like a raindrop landing wrong. As you sit very, very still, your physician begins his favorite part, story time. Did you know, he starts, that the Romans used leeches, too? But not just for medicine. They wore them like jewelry. You pause. That seems bold. Oh yes, he insists. Upper-class Roman women sometimes placed leeches behind their ears to drain excess blood and achieve a fashionable pallor. Pale was chic. The fainter you looked, the richer you appeared. You raise an eyebrow. Fashion through fainting. Sounds like half of modern runway culture. He continues, and in India, leeches were described in Sanskrit texts as early as the 6th century BCE. Used in surgery. Considered highly clean animals. Can you imagine? You imagine a tiny leech being handed a surgeon's mask and nod seriously. Leeches, it seems, were global celebrities. In Islamic medicine, they were praised for their gentleness. In China, early texts noted their ability to unblock stagnation. Even in ancient Egypt, where bodies were embalmed and organs removed with all the grace of a mummy-themed escape room, leeches made occasional appearances in healing scrolls. Historians still argue whether leeches spread through cultural exchange or parallel development, but the trend is clear. Pretty much everyone, everywhere, at some point, looked at a squishy blood-sucking worm and thought, yes, this could help. Your aggressive Hungarian friend finally drops off, rolling over like a cat after dinner. The bite mark is oddly neat. Almost efficient. You don't hate it. The apprentice arrives to clean the wound and offers you something new, a sweet-smelling salve made from goose fat and marjoram. Supposedly helps the skin seal faster and coaxes the body's heat inward. Whatever that means. You lean back, eyelids drooping, and begin to wonder, how did we all get here? Why were humans so comfortable with this? Turns out, leeches weren't just tolerated, they were harvested. Entire medieval economies sprang up around them. Swamps were considered gold mines. Peasants would wade into shallow, muddy pools with bare legs, letting the leeches attach. Then they'd pluck them off and sell them to apothecaries or traveling surgeons. Some even trained dogs and donkeys to go in first, using their blood as bait. It was dangerous work. Too many bites could lead to anemia or infection. But the profits were good for a worm wrangler. In some parts of France and Britain, leech collecting was a recognized trade. Leech finders, they were called. Often women. Often working alone in cold marshes at dawn. There's even a tale of one who trained her geese to walk into the water, collect leeches on their legs, and return calmly to her. Now that's animal husbandry. The demand grew so high by the 18th century that wild leech populations started collapsing. By the 1800s, leeches were being shipped in barrels, millions at a time, across Europe and into medical schools. Hospitals had tanks filled with them. Surgeons had favorites. They even started giving them names. You're starting to feel less weird about your own growing appreciation. But it wasn't just about the worm. The entire bloodletting ritual had its own choreography. Before application, hot cloth to open the pores. After detachment, cool herbs to close the skin. A special diet was often recommended, light stews, nothing too spicy or oily. Wine? Maybe. Beer? Definitely not. It was believed to stir the humors. You're told to avoid loud sounds and strong smells for at least a day. Apparently your senses are more sensitive now. Your brain is like a freshly tilled garden bed, don't go planting chaos in it. As the day stretches on, your physician introduces another leech variety, Hirudo from Japan. Smaller, more precise. Used in delicate work around eyes, fingers, and yes, genitals. He assures you today's application won't be that exciting. You sigh with relief. The discussion shifts, as it often does, to urine. Specifically, The practice of uroscopy, examining pee for diagnosis. Physicians used clear flasks held up to sunlight, inspecting color, smell, and sediment. There were entire manuals devoted to this. Your physician has one. He flips it open and proudly shows you a chart that resembles a paint swatch collection from a medieval interior designer. Straw yellow, he notes, balanced. Cloudy red, he frowns, worrisome. Dark brown, he raises an eyebrow, excess of black bile. You remind him your sample was sunset gold. He beams. Textbook. It's strange, this mix of solemnity and absurdity. Every ritual, every observation, no matter how questionable, feels like a form of care. A belief that bodies can be read, interpreted, adjusted. That you are a system worth tuning. And tuning requires tools. Even slimy ones. You lie there, post-leeching, slightly woozy but oddly satisfied. Your blood feels quieter, like a radio finally tuned between stations. You're not sure if you're healing or hallucinating. Maybe both. You doze off thinking of that Roman woman in her silk robes, a leech nestled behind each ear, whispering fashion tips through a faint haze of blood loss. She would have loved you. You wake to the gentle clink of glass vials and whispered Latin. The room smells of warmed honey and old parchment. Your physician is preparing something called a tonic of mild extraction, which, judging by the ingredients, includes lavender, vinegar, and a pinch of dried owl droppings. You don't ask questions anymore. You just drink what's handed to you and hope it doesn't talk back. Today's procedure is symbolic bleeding. It sounds ominous. You imagine a ceremony involving candles and chanting goats, but in reality, it just means drawing blood from a place that represents the ailment, not necessarily where the pain is. Have a headache? Bleed from the foot. Heartache? Try the thumb. Feeling unmotivated? There's a leech for that, probably on your lower back. Your physician explains it all with a gentle murmur, his finger tracing your skin like a cartographer mapping a very emotional coastline. Your inner organs, he says, speak through the surface. The body is a mirror of itself. By treating the skin, we whisper to the deeper parts. You half expect him to pull out a crystal ball. Instead, he pulls out a book. This one's different, smaller, bound in dark leather with a faintly ominous shimmer. It's a translation of Galen's De Sectis. Galen, the rock star of Roman medicine, whose theories would reign supreme for more than 1,000 years. Galen believed in the balance of humors, just like Hippocrates, but he added layers. Organs had personalities, fluids had directional flows, and symptoms were clues in a grand internal drama. Historians still argue whether Galen's influence slowed down medical progress or kept it alive through sheer popularity. Either way, his writings became gospel. Even monks in icy monasteries knew his name. And Galen loved bloodletting. But he didn't love leeches. That's right, despite the worm's starring role in your recent recovery, Galen considered them a bit crude. He preferred direct venesection, cutting the vein with a blade. More control, he argued. More honor. Leeches are for the delicate, he once said, but the knife is for the noble. You glance at your own limbs, dotted with tiny apostrophes of past feedings. Are you delicate now? Apparently yes, because today's leech is dainty and shy. A pale little thing from the wetlands near Florence. Its official job, relieve liver congestion. Its actual behavior, wander up your arm like a tourist on a slow afternoon. Your physician gently guides it into place and tells you a story to pass the time. In the 12th century, he begins, there was a bishop in Normandy who swore by leeches. Carried them in a pouch around his neck. fed them weekly, called them his brothers. You blink slowly. You've heard of emotional support animals, but emotional support bloodsuckers is a new one. Legend says, he continues, he once sent a message to the Pope written in his own blood, collected by his leech. You wonder if the Pope appreciated the gesture, or the hygiene. As the leech begins its slow, rhythmic sipping, your mind drifts to a medieval leech clinic. Picture it, a cozy, candlelit room filled with earthenware jars, each one labeled with ornate calligraphy. A velvet curtain separates the genders. Gentle harp music plays in the background. The waiting room is mostly nobles and monks exchanging notes on bile textures. You could run that place. You'd call it the Sanguine Sanctuary. Appointments by sundial only. Back in the present, your physician checks the leech and gives a satisfied nod. Not too much, he murmurs. You must keep your warmth. We only correct, never purge. He's been repeating that phrase a lot lately. It's become his mantra. Correct, not purge. It's a good motto, really. Could apply to life. Relationships. Hairstyling. After the leech is removed and given its ceremonial rinse, you're treated to a warming cloth and a spoonful of mead, just enough to bring the heart back from the edge. The apprentice fans your face with a small sprig of mint. It's very theatrical, but oddly comforting. You ask what happens to the leeches when they retire. He blinks, surprised by the question. Some are used again. If they grow too fat or old, they're released into quiet streams. Others, well, occasionally they're dried and ground into powder. You pause mid-sip. For fertility, he adds with a wink. You decide not to pursue that thread. Instead, he pulls up a stool and begins sketching again. He's modifying your body map, marking the zones of symbolic pain. He adds a star over your spleen region. You've been holding sadness there, he murmurs. You nod, because maybe you have. Or maybe you just didn't like the broth last night. Either way, he seems pleased with your progress. You're realigning, he says. Softening. Listening. It sounds like you're being trained for a spiritual retreat, but part of you does feel better. Not healed, exactly, but shifted. Quieter inside. Like the static has faded. You ask him if everyone responds like this. He shakes his head. Some fight it. Some bleed too much. Some feel nothing. The key is to believe, not in magic, but in meaning. If the treatment means something to you, it will work harder. You ponder that as he packs up for the evening. The room dims, the fire crackles low, and the leech in the corner jar does a little post-dinner wiggle. Outside, a nightingale sings. Inside, your blood hums a softer tune. You're not cured, but you're curious. And sometimes, that's the start of healing. You dream that night of rivers filled with leeches wearing tiny monocles, debating humors in Latin. One of them, with a top hat, gives you a thumbs up despite not having thumbs and declares, "Splendid viscosity today." You wake up smiling. Today's treatment is different. You're not being bled. You're observing. Your physician has a new patient, a knight. Or what's left of one. He limps in, armor creaking, eyes shadowed. Claims he took a spear to the thigh 3 winters ago and ever since, his vital winds have been misaligned. He feels cold when it's warm, trembles at dawn, and forgets which foot to move first. You sit back as your physician gets to work. No dramatic leech unveiling this time, this is a blade job. Venesection. The knight grips the edge of the table. He's stoic, but sweat beads on his brow as the small incision is made just above his elbow. Blood seeps out, dark and slow, pooling into a ceramic bowl. Your physician tilts the bowl, watching the flow. Sluggish, he murmurs. Too much black bile. Liver not cooperating. Then he places a leech directly beside the cut. You're confused, wasn't the blade enough? Turns out, combining both methods was considered high art in medieval medicine. The blade starts the conversation. The leech finishes it. Like tag-teaming your toxins. The leech eagerly attaches, and the knight visibly relaxes. Maybe it's the blood loss. Maybe it's the symbolism. Maybe he's just happy to sit down for once. Your physician leans close and whispers, "This is where humors become personalities." He gestures to the knight. He is melancholic. Black bile dominates. That's why he's heavy in movement, slow in thought. But after this, he trails off. He might dream of sunlight again. It sounds poetic until you remember his holding a bowl of blood and a very focused worm. You ask about the other humors, just to keep the conversation grounded. He lists them off like old friends. Blood, for the sanguine, cheerful, energetic, occasionally reckless. Phlegm, for the phlegmatic, calm, loyal, a bit sluggish. Yellow bile, for the choleric, fiery, ambitious, easily irritable. Black bile, for the melancholic, thoughtful, artistic, occasionally doomed. Historians still argue whether these personality ties were literal, symbolic, or just a clever way for physicians to sneak philosophy into their practice. Either way, it made people feel seen, or at least categorized. You watch the knight's face soften. He looks younger now, less haunted, like some invisible weight has eased off his spine. You don't say anything, but the physician catches your gaze. "It's not always about healing," he says softly. "Sometimes it's about hope." Then he turns to the apprentice and begins preparing a poultice of rosemary and wine to seal the wound. You're handed a scroll and told to read aloud. It's an herbal compendium. You clear your throat and stumble through lines like fennel warms the belly and guides the gaze, and nettle stirs the blood into joyous haste. Somewhere around mugwort awakens the moon in the veins. The knight chuckles. You feel oddly proud. There's comfort in this theater of care. The precise motions. The half-truths that feel more helpful than facts. The strange blend of ritual and reason. Later, as the knight limps out with a cleaner bandage and a smile he didn't arrive with, you're left alone with the physician. He picks up a dried rose and drops it into a steaming bowl. "Do you know why we love leeches?" he asks. You resist the urge to say they're low-maintenance pets. He answers his own question anyway. Because they never pretend. They don't flatter. They take what's wrong and remove it. Silently. Without judgment. You nod, even though you're still not sure what's being removed. He smiles. Most healing is believing that you're worth the effort. That night, you help sort leeches by temperament. Yes, temperament. There's the slow drainer, the quick latcher, and the one the apprentice calls Sir Bite-a-lot, who once bit through his glove. You're told not to use that one unless the patient is deeply choleric or deeply annoying. The jars are labeled not with numbers, but with astrological symbols. Mars for aggressive suckers. Venus for gentle ones. Mercury for those who move fast. Saturn, well, no one touches the Saturn leeches. Too moody. You tuck them in for the night, literally, with a cloth draped over the jar to simulate darkness. They like that, apparently. And as you blow out the last candle, you whisper to the dark shelf of quietly squirming medical assistants. Thanks for your service. Because honestly, they deserve it. You awaken to a strange sound, soft squelching followed by an enthusiastic aha. The apprentice is at it again. He's up before dawn, experimenting with leech placement. Today's target: a tax collector with mystery fatigue and the posture of a collapsed accordion. He insists he hasn't felt right since Saturn moved into opposition with his spleen. Your physician doesn't blink at this celestial diagnosis. He simply nods and reaches for the leech marked with a tiny tag. Yes, the Saturn leech. The taxman recoils slightly. Will it hurt? No, says the apprentice brightly. Just tickle, then tingle, then drain. That's not comforting. But the taxman complies, probably too tired to protest. You've moved from patient to observer, but the physician includes you now in consultations. He asks what you see in people's posture, their skin tone, the smell of their breath, subtle cues in a system that borders on the poetic. Blood, after all, isn't just a fluid here. It's the narrative of your life, written in plasma and pulse. This morning's leech placement is experimental. The temple. According to some fringe texts from Moorish scholars, bleeding near the head can relieve inner turbulence, dream confusion, melancholy, and what one physician dramatically dubbed the ghost wind of regret. Historians still argue whether these cranial bloodlettings were medical or more symbolic, perhaps a primitive neurology or just astrology with extra steps. Either way, it's happening right in front of you, and the taxman is humming a hymn now, eyes rolling gently. The apprentice looks to you with a raised brow. He always sings when they feed. Same song every time. You lean in. Yep. Definitely humming dies irae. There's something eerie about watching a man lose blood and gain peace simultaneously. But then, peace in this age is hard to come by. Most people live in a tight fist of fear, of plague, of war, of bad bread, and if a worm can soften that grip, who are you to judge? Later, during lunch, spiced lentils, tepid ale, one extremely confident beat, your physician hands you a crinkled scroll. It's part herbal, part cosmology, part therapy workbook. On the margin, someone's doodled a leech with angel wings. Ever hear of the doctrine of signatures? He asks. You have not, but the name sounds like something a medieval boy band would sing about. It's the belief, he says, that God marked each plant with signs of its use. Walnut looks like a brain, so it helps the mind. Liverwort for the liver. Bloodroot for blood. And leeches look like, you ask, unsure where this logic leads. Veins, he grins. Or question marks, depending on your mood. You sip your ale and ponder the mystery of divine graphic design. The doctrine of signatures had real sway in medical circles. It offered guidance when science fell short, nature as a coded text, every shape a hint, every color a prescription. It gave order to chaos, meaning to mud. And speaking of mud, you're off to the marshes. Leeches don't replenish themselves. They must be gathered, carefully and often. Today is a collection day, and the apprentice is leading you through knee-high reeds, a sack of pig's blood trailing behind like some ghastly picnic. They love the scent, he explains, sloshing it gently. The technique is as medieval as it gets. You wade into the wetland, blood bait at your side, and wait for the leeches to come. You're basically a snack decoy. And they do come. Wriggling through the water, black and gleaming like spilled ink. They find the bag, some find you. You're told not to flinch. You flinch, says the apprentice, and you lose control. You stand as still as your quivering knees allow. A few latch on. It's weirdly gentle, like being hugged by a thumb. Then he teaches you the flick and drop method. Dislodge them with a light finger tap and let them fall into a glass jar. You miss twice, nearly drop one down your boot, and finally land one in with a victorious plop. Natural talent, the apprentice smirks. You wonder how often he says that. But you do feel proud. Back at the clinic, the fresh leeches are sorted into tanks. They'll fast for a week to strengthen their hunger. The older ones get rotated out, the oldest ones honored. There's a small wall niche, the Leech Shrine, where the clinic commemorates its most noble drainers. One is named Ambrosia. She fed on a duke who recovered from midwinter soul collapse. The duke later sent her a ruby-studded jar. She died of old age and is now dried and perched under a tiny arch of rosemary. You try not to be moved. But you kind of are. Before nightfall, one last patient arrives, a young woman from the village. Quiet, eyes downcast, claiming she can't sleep. There's too much blood in my head, she says. It's a common complaint here. Overthinking was considered a literal overflow of internal fluids. Your physician listens carefully, then selects a leech and places it behind her ear. A gentle location. The one Galen called the whisper spot. You sit in stillness as the leech feeds, and slowly her shoulders drop, her eyes close, her breath deepens. Sometimes, the physician murmurs, the cure is in being witnessed. It's a lovely sentiment. Even if said while supervising a worm drinking blood behind someone's ear. By the end of the day, you've stopped thinking of leeches as gross or strange. They've become familiar. Like quiet colleagues. Sticky, yes. But diligent. And somehow, they're starting to make more sense than most things. You're scrubbing jars when the apprentice drops the news like it's casual. We're going to court tomorrow. You look up, palms wet, brain misfiring. Court. He nods. Royal summons. They need a bleeding. And we have the best leeches south of York. Apparently, when nobles get moody, itchy, pale, or just suspiciously sad, they don't call for philosophers, they call for a traveling leechmaster. And your little back alley shop has earned a reputation. The next morning, you're packed into a wagon with cages of herbs, rolls of linen, and 3 very pampered jars marked premium. The leeches have names now, Jubilee, Echo, and Margot. One of them rode the entire way tucked into the apprentice's collar. You try not to ask questions. The castle looms ahead, a stone beast against the early mist. You've never been inside one before. You expect grandeur. You do not expect so many stairs. The guards don't search you. No one ever searches the leech guy. Your group is escorted through hushed corridors to a private chamber where a noblewoman reclines dramatically on a velvet couch. She's wrapped in silks and distress. A scent of lavender battles something earthier, opium, maybe, or anxiety turned sour. She doesn't look sick, exactly. She looks bored. And deeply over-medicated. The court physician is already there, arms folded, eyeing your little group like you've brought scorpions instead of science. You remember your training, respect the court, don't contradict the in-house doctor, and let the leech do the talking. Your physician bows low and asks for a moment to examine her. She gestures lazily. I've got too much wind in the heart, she mutters. It hums when I breathe. An odd diagnosis. But not unheard of. In the medieval mind, wind was a real thing inside you. Too much of it, and you risked internal storms, dizziness, forgetfulness, even spontaneous nosebleeds. Like being haunted by your own lungs. The house doctor scoffs. She's melancholic. I recommend cold compresses and a gooseberry tincture. Your physician smiles politely, leans in, and very gently lifts her wrist. No pulse at the liver line, he murmurs. The room tenses. The noblewoman perks up. What does that mean? It means, he says, we must coax the spirit wind out. Through proper channels. He lifts the velvet from her ankle and selects the placement, just behind the knee. A spot tied to both circulation and emotional release in some fringe galenic diagrams. He nods to you. You hold the jar. Echo the leech floats, elegant as ever. You tilt the glass, and with practiced fingers, your physician guides Echo to the skin. She latches instantly. The noblewoman gasps, then relaxes. Her hand twitches open, releasing a fist you didn't know she'd been holding. And just like that, the room goes quiet. Everyone's watching the worm, including the skeptical court physician, who now looks slightly less skeptical and slightly more curious. Historians still argue whether these courtly bloodlettings were more political than medical. Was the treatment about health? Or about the comfort of being seen, touched, and attended to by those with mystery and ritual in their toolkit? Probably both. By the time Echo detaches, the noblewoman is slouched and smiling. Better, she whispers. Your physician cleans the bite, applies a salve of calendula and fig sap, and bows again. Rest. But avoid sour foods until the next moon. As you're packing up, the court physician sidles over. That's effective, he says. For a parasite. Your physician grins. Ah, but aren't we all, in service of healing? The next patient is less graceful, a visiting envoy who complains of gout of the head. Which is not a thing. But in medieval terms, it might refer to migraines, tension, or just diplomatic stress. You're told to prepare Margot. You ask where to place her. The court physician mutters something about behind the ear again. Your physician disagrees. Belly, he says. Lower left. Where the shame pools. You blink. The shame? Apparently, certain emotions were thought to gather in the abdomen like moody ghosts. Especially in men. Anger, lust, guilt, they all fermented in the gut. So bleeding that area, even subtly, was believed to release not just toxins, but bad character. You follow orders. Margot does her work. The envoy groans. Feels like letting go. You nod solemnly, as if you always knew that was the goal. That night, your group is offered rooms in the servants' wing. You're given broth, barley bread, and a blanket that smells like boiled cabbage. The apprentice tells you this is the best it ever gets. You sleep near the jars, just in case. You dream of ballrooms filled with noblemen arguing over leech breeds. One insists that Hungarian leeches taste sweeter. Another claims a Welsh strain cured his entire household of ghost cough. In the morning, you're summoned again. Not for a treatment, this time, for a consultation. A young prince, maybe 13, won't speak. He stopped 3 weeks ago after seeing something in the garden. No fever, no wound, just silence. You're not a therapist. But you are, increasingly, someone who listens to the body in strange ways. Your physician examines the boy. He looks healthy. But when asked a question, he stares at the floor. A statue of nerves. Then your physician tries something different. He places a leech, not to bite, just to show. Have you met Jubilee? He asks softly, setting the jar near the boy's hand. The boy flinches. Then looks. The leech writhes against the glass like it's dancing. The boy blinks once. Then again. A small twitch in the corner of his mouth. You wait. He doesn't speak. But his fingers inch forward until they rest on the jar's rim. You don't draw blood that day. But maybe, you draw breath. The road back from court is rutted and slow, but your group is in high spirits. Jubilee has been officially dubbed her lady's favorite worm, and Echo is riding in a freshly embroidered pouch like a medieval celebrity. You, meanwhile, have been promoted from that apprentice's helper to coordinator of the bloodletting vessels. Which sounds more impressive than it is. Mostly, you carry jars. Still, the trip has shifted something. You're no longer just tagging along, you're observing, interpreting, responding. You're thinking like a leechman now. Heaven help you. Back at the clinic, it's chaos. Word of your court visit beat you home. People line up outside the door like it's a bakery on feast day. Some want relief for sciatica, others for cursed dreams. One man insists he needs a leech to extract a snake of fire coiled in his bowels. You leave that one to the senior staff. Today's cases are all over the map, but one stands out, a knight recently returned from a crusade, sweating and muttering about sandstorms and eyes in the night. You know the look, he's been through it. The physician calls it hot blood syndrome, a vague term for post-traumatic agitation. You guide him to the wooden bench and help him roll up his sleeve. His skin is covered in little welts, some new, some old. Bad air, he mumbles. Still feel it in me. You nod. And when he closes his eyes, the physician chooses a leech for him, Juno, small but greedy. He places it near the crook of the arm, where travelers often carry their tension. The knight exhales sharply as it latches on. But after a few minutes, his jaw unclenches. His fingers loosen. It's like watching a wind down happen in slow motion. Better than confession, he mutters, half asleep. Historians still debate whether returning crusaders were treated differently from other patients, or just more poetically. Some records show physicians crafting personalized bleedings based on which lands the knight had visited, as though foreign soil left traces in the blood. Whether that's medicine or medieval theater, you're not sure. But it certainly makes the treatment feel like a ritual. Later, the physician hands you a thick tome with iron clasps and foxed pages. Case records, he says. From before the last plague wave. You open it and find more than symptoms. Each entry tells a story. One describes a woman convinced her melancholy came from the ghosts of her ancestors, who she believed had nested in her spine. The physician treated her with leeches placed down her back in a symmetrical pattern, then sprinkled her with salt and made her sit in a garden for 2 days. According to the notes, she danced afterward. Another entry, patient, blacksmith. Complaint, rage. Bled from heels to humble him. You raise your eyebrows. He wouldn't kneel, the physician shrugs. So we took the fire out of his feet. It's not all so symbolic. Some notes are brutally practical. Bleeding to lower fever, to reduce swelling, to prepare for surgery, such as it is. Leeching as priming, balancing, quieting the chaos. Do we ever stop? You ask. I mean, does anyone ever get balanced enough? He leans back. Maybe. Or maybe the goal isn't perfect balance. Maybe it's reminding the body that someone's listening. You remember the prince, his hand on the jar. The noblewoman exhaling behind velvet. The crusader melting on a bench. You nod. You're starting to see it. Then comes something different, a letter from a monastery. They want help. A monk is possessed with invisible heaviness, and no prayers are lifting it. You're not surprised, monasteries are hotbeds for mental and spiritual ailments that don't fit neat categories. The apprentice grumbles. They'll blame Saturn again. But the physician is already packing. They have good wine, he says. The monastery is 3 days away, nestled in the folds of a grey hillside. By the time you arrive, it's raining, and the path smells of wet slate and old moss. The monk is waiting, eyes sunken, fingers twitching in his sleeves. He whispers his problem, "My dreams are louder than my waking life." You feel that in your bones. The treatment is part bleeding, part ritual. Leeches placed at the temples and the base of the skull. A balm of poppy seed and warm milk is rubbed on his feet. Candles are lit. Psalms are sung. The physician's voice is quiet as he works. Dreams, he says, are not always spiritual. Sometimes they're just spilled humors. The monk shudders. The leeches feed. The storm outside softens. There's no miracle. But the monk sleeps that night for the first time in weeks, according to the abbot. You stay an extra day, sipping rain-thinned wine and helping organize their herb stores. One monk shows you their own rudimentary medical records, lists of symptoms tied to moon phases. It's strangely accurate in places. Other times, it's gibberish. Historians still argue. The monk tells you if this is science or superstition. I say, if it helps someone sleep, it's holy. You return to the clinic lighter. Maybe it's the wine. Or maybe it's seeing how even in stone halls with vows of silence, the body still whispers and leeches still listen. The next day, a woman arrives with her daughter. The girl is pale, listless, her breath shallow. She won't eat, the mother says. Won't talk. The priest said she's fading. You ask how long it's been. Since the twins died, she whispers. Your physician sighs. Grief. It's not in the manuals. But it's everywhere. The treatment isn't about fixing. It's about presence. One leech on the ankle. A soft cloth on her forehead. You hold her hand as the leech feeds. She doesn't flinch. But after 10 minutes, she blinks slowly and turns her head slightly toward you. It's enough. You're folding linens when the midwife storms in, her apron soaked and her eyes sharp. I need him, she says, no greeting, no explanation. Now. A baby's coming the wrong way. You freeze. The physician nods calmly, wraps his leech pouch around his belt, and grabs a pot of chamomile. You follow with extra cloth and a jar marked ash. It's not for ritual, it's for grip. Sometimes, sweat and blood make things too slippery for reason. The house is cramped and hot. A fire burns despite the spring air, and every surface seems to vibrate with tension. Inside, the laboring woman howls, low and desperate. Her face is flushed, her hands clenched, and her husband is pacing like a trapped animal. You've seen births before, but not like this. The baby is breech, feet first, stuck, and the mother is already exhausted. The midwife glances at the physician and mutters, "We need her calm. She'll tear." He doesn't reach for a blade. He reaches for a jar. A single leech is placed oddly on the inside of the wrist, near a pressure point said to dull pain. There's no real proof it works. But the mother exhales. Her arms unclench. The bleeding is minimal, but the symbolism is loud. You are being helped. You are being seen. The birth is difficult. There's shouting. There's prayer. At one point, the midwife bites her own sleeve. But the child comes slick, silent, and blinking with the wide-eyed terror of a creature pulled too soon from elsewhere. A boy. Alive. Barely. The mother sinks back, whispering something you can't hear. The midwife catches your eye. She wouldn't have made it without that calming. Your worms earned their supper. Later, back at the clinic, the physician shows you a rare text, one of Galen's lesser-known treatises, annotated in 3 languages. It contains diagrams of the womb shaped like pear trees, and passages about the female wind. According to this, childbirth is not just a physical event, it's an emotional purging. A loss of balance that must be corrected or it will poison the mother's blood. He points to a passage. This, he says, is why some recommend bleeding after birth, not to harm, but to stabilize. You frown. Is it always necessary? Historians still argue, he says, whether postnatal bleeding helped or harmed women more. It likely depended on the birth. And the leech? You nod. The phrase "it depends" is becoming your favorite answer to everything. Later that week, a merchant arrives with an injury to his thigh, swollen, red, and angry. He says he fell on an oyster cart. You don't ask for more detail. The swelling looks infected. The skin is hot. In today's terms, he's halfway to sepsis. But back then, it's simply bad humors pooling in the limb. The physician recommends bleeding near the site. But not just a standard vein cut, he wants a leech, one of the bigger ones. You fetch Agnes. She's almost too fat to move these days. Probably pregnant. But she knows her job. As she bites, the tension in the leg seems to soften. You swear the color fades slightly. The merchant stares at her like she's a tiny angel of ooze. Never thought I'd be grateful for a worm, he mutters. The physician grins. She's technically an annelid. The next day, the swelling is down. The man offers double payment and a basket of dried figs. You realize, not for the first time, that recovery often comes from unexpected places and unexpected creatures. But not every treatment ends well. A child is brought in, feverish, limp, eyes rolling. You suspect a brain infection. The physician tries everything: cold compresses, bark tea, bleeding from the neck and behind the ear. The leeches latch, fill, drop. But the fever clings like a curse. By morning, the child is gone. The family doesn't blame you. They say the stars were cruel this week. But you carry it anyway. That night, your physician sits beside you and offers a bitter herbal wine. You'll lose patience, he says. Even with your best worm. Should we have tried something else? You ask. He sighs. Historians still argue whether bloodletting helped with fevers like that. Some say it drained strength. Others say it gave the body a fighting chance. You watch a leech glide lazily in her jar. She doesn't know what went wrong. She just did what she always does. You wonder if that's comfort or despair. A few days later, a friar arrives. He doesn't want treatment, he wants to observe. I'm writing a sermon, he explains, about balance and blood. He watches silently as a patient is bled from the forearm, a standard melancholy case. He asks questions afterward. About the leeches. About the vessels. About the sounds people make when the pain lifts. Finally, he nods. There's something sacred about it, he says. Like penance. But wetter. He returns a week later with a loaf of honey bread and a poem written in Latin about divine worms. You don't understand most of it. But the gesture is oddly moving. You pin it to the wall. Another day, a carpenter comes in with a nail through his foot. You expect the usual grumbling, but he's calm, almost amused. Can you pull it out? No, the physician says, but we can ease the swelling. Leeches again. You never tire of how many injuries seem to invite their company. After the treatment, the man grins. You know, I used to hate these little beasts. Now I think they're smarter than half the nobility. You nod. They're less fussy, at least. That night, you clean the jars, check the water, and feed the hungriest ones a drop of goat blood saved from the kitchen. They wriggle like children after sweets. You sit on the bench, watching them float. The wind outside has shifted. You swear you can smell autumn coming. Your hands smell like salt and vinegar. Your apron is stained with the week's work. You're tired. But it's the good kind. You didn't choose this path. But now you're walking it with steady steps. And your leeches, they're thriving. You're polishing jars when word arrives. A nobleman's son has been stung by a bee, or so they think, and is swelling fast. His face, neck, even his lips puff like dough left too long by the fire. The message is urgent, and it's not a request. It's a demand. The physician doesn't flinch. His scene worse. Grab the leech pouch, he tells you. And the sharpest of the lazy ones. That would be Minerva, who lounges most days like she's royalty. But she bites fast when she decides to care. You hurry to the estate, where the nobleman meets you in a frenzy. Fix him, he says, gripping your sleeve. Or I'll see you rot. No pressure. The boy lies in a feather-stuffed bed, gasping. His eyes are barely visible beneath swollen lids. His chest rises in short, ragged breaths. Today, it's not about humors. It's about speed. The physician explains, calmly, that leeches can sometimes reduce swelling through their saliva's anticoagulants. Modern medicine will one day call it hirudin. You just call it the juice. Minerva is placed just under the jawline, and she bites almost instantly, bless her cold heart. You wait. 5 minutes. 10. The swelling in the throat starts to soften. The boy's breathing deepens. He moans softly. You don't exhale until the physician does. Historians still argue whether medieval doctors understood allergic reactions or just treated them as choler rising. But this time, at least, the leech bought the boy time his lungs couldn't. The nobleman tries to press a gold ring into your palm. You shake your head. We accept figs, you say. Back at the clinic, you feel oddly invincible. Like you wrestled death and yanked his beard. Until the next patient reminds you how little you control. A miller's wife, soaked in river water, comes in coughing blood. She fell, hit her head, and swallowed a fair amount of grime before being pulled out. The physician frowns at the red foam on her lips. Lungs, he mutters. Or something creeping up from the gut. You offer to prep leeches, but he shakes his head. They won't help here. Not this time. Still, you fetch 2 anyway. Jubilee and Marcus. Just in case. The woman doesn't last the night. It's a strange thing, learning when not to treat. It feels like doing nothing. But sometimes, nothing is mercy. The physician explains it as triage, though he never uses that word. You'll know, he says. When help becomes harm. You tuck that away. Not everything is curable. Not even with your sharpest worms. That lesson echoes a week later when an elderly man arrives with paralysis on one side of his body. You recognize it immediately, even if no one has names for it yet. He slurs his words. His hand curls in on itself. A stroke, you think. Or what they might call an imbalance of winds in the brain. There's no cure. But there is relief. The physician bleeds him gently from the unaffected side, a technique drawn from Arabic texts he once studied in Toledo. To draw off the fire, he says. The leech latches. The man sighs. His eye softens. You'll regain some, the physician tells him. Not all. But maybe enough to drink wine again without choking. They both smile at that. Historians still argue how much medieval physicians understood about strokes. Some texts mention brain apoplexy and connect it with blocked flow, but it's wrapped in metaphors, storms, thunder, vapor lock. You translate that in your head, thunder in the veins. That night, you catch yourself talking to the leeches again. You're doing good, you whisper to Clara, who's nestled on a smooth stone. 1 bite at a time. She doesn't respond. But she does a slow little backflip, and you take that as agreement. Then comes a child with nosebleeds so frequent his mother believes he's cursed. She brings a lock of his hair, wrapped in string, as proof. See how light it's turned, she says. Something's draining him. You don't laugh. You've learned not to. The physician examines the boy and determines his blood is too light, possibly overly rich in air or wind. The solution? Counterbalance with gentle bleeding, not for loss, but for redirection. He places a single leech on the child's inner elbow, careful to make it feel like a game. This one likes songs, he says, and the boy sings a shaky version of a shepherd's tune while the worm feeds. It works, oddly. Whether from the bleeding or the placebo, or just rest, the child's nose quiets by the next morning. His mother leaves behind a small bag of buttons. For luck, she says. You add them to the apothecary shelf like trophies. Not all superstitions are wrong. Some just wear different names. And then there's the messenger. He arrives pale, shivering, with bruises blooming on his skin like crushed plums. He collapses at the door. The plague again. You feel your breath catch. But the physician is already moving. Gloves, vinegar cloth, quick bleeding from behind the ears. Sometimes it breaks the fever, he says. Sometimes it doesn't. You're assigned to clean everything he touches. You don't complain. The leech Artemis, sharp and hungry, feeds briefly, then drops off with a satisfied twitch. The messenger survives the night. You don't know if it was the leech, or the prayers, or dumb luck. Historians still debate whether bloodletting helped plague victims or just gave them something to do while they waited to die. You'd guess a mix. But tonight, at least, it worked. The physician looks tired. Older than usual. We're not miracle workers, he says. No, you answer. We're leech wranglers. He laughs. Close enough. That night, you check the jars like always. Your fingers know the rhythm now. Rinse, inspect, feed, settle. It's almost meditative. You look at them, these ancient little beasts who've seen more skin than any lover, tasted more blood than any blade, and survived centuries doing the same slow work. They're quiet. But they're listening. So are you. You're sweeping ash from the hearth when a courier arrives with a scroll sealed in blue wax, a color you've only seen once before. Royalty. Or close enough to it. The physician scans the message, then folds it neatly. We're summoned, he says. To the monastery at Eldon Vale. You blink. That's a 2-day ride. For what? He only mutters, something sacred. Or secret. You pack the leech jars carefully, wrapping each in straw and cloth. The physician brings every text he owns with notes on blood, spirits, and purification rituals. You add a loaf of rye and 3 apples. The journey is cold. Your teeth chatter, and one of the leeches leaks slightly, soaking your sleeve with a syrupy scent of old iron. Eldon Vale looms from the fog like a sleeping beast, high stone walls, towers that pierce the sky like needles, and bells that don't seem to chime so much as hum. Inside, the air is damp with incense and something older. Mold, maybe. Or memory. You're led to the infirmary, where an abbess lies, pale as the moon and drifting in and out of muttering dreams. Her skin is blotched with blackish splotches, but not from plague. This is older. Deeper. The physician suspects poisoning. Or spirits. Perhaps both, he says. You're told she fasted for 30 days, seeking a vision. Now, her blood is thin, her mind untethered, and her body cold at the core. Leeches? You ask, hesitant. He nods. 1. Maybe 2. Gentle ones. We're not draining, we're unblocking. You select Beatrice and Joan, two of the lightest. They feed, slow and tender, beneath her collarbone. As they draw, the abbess stills. Her lips part. She exhales the name of a saint you've never heard of. A monk weeps quietly in the corner. She's coming back, he whispers. Historians still argue whether such mystical treatments were healing or heresy. But in this place, with its echoing chants and flickering candles, you can believe anything. That night, you sleep in the scriptorium, curled beside the jars. You dream of leeches writing letters in blood, spelling words you don't understand. You wake to find one of the monks copying a treatise your physician lent him. It's remarkable, he says. The balance of fluids. The poetry of it. You smile. It's messier in practice. He nods. All sacred things are. Back at the clinic days later, you receive a strange delivery, a bundle of parchment from a traveling scholar. His compiled notes from multiple cities, Paris, Bologna, even Cordoba, on bloodletting methods. You spend the next week reading. Some advocate bleeding from the ankle for sorrow. Others claim the top of the foot connects directly to grief. One text insists ear leeches cure deafness if applied during a full moon. Historians still debate whether these practices were medicine, mysticism, or both. You stop trying to separate them. You try the ankle method on a man mourning his wife. He cries for an hour, then falls into the first deep sleep he's had in weeks. "Thank you," he whispers the next morning. "I didn't know I could still dream." Not every patient is so grateful. A wealthy widow arrives, demanding treatment for melancholy of the womb, whatever that means today. She complains of fatigue, fainting spells, and a general disgust with her servants. The physician listens patiently. Then he prescribes a warm poultice and 2 leeches, placed on the inner thighs. You raise an eyebrow. She wants drama, he says. Let's give her something to talk about. The treatment is awkward. The widow yelps, flails, and insists one of the leeches winked at her. Still, she leaves with color in her cheeks. I feel strangely vital, she says, nearly skipping. You make a note. Drama might be half the medicine. Later, you tend to an apprentice blacksmith who sliced open his palm on a blade he swore was cursed. The wound is angry, puffed with pus and heat. Infection. Modern you would think, antibiotics. But this version of you thinks, leech, drainage, poultice of crushed garlic and lard. You pick Hector, his precise and insistent. As he feeds, the tension in the skin seems to soften. You drain the rest, wrap the hand, and send the boy home with instructions to keep it dry and whispered blessings to Saint Eligius, patron of metalworkers. He recovers in 3 days. Returns with a token, a small iron horse. You keep it on your shelf. That night, the physician shares a theory. Maybe leeches don't just draw blood. Maybe they draw attention, care, presence. And that's half the cure. You nod. It's not just the worm. It's the ritual. One day, a traveler from the east stops in with jars of his own. Not leeches, but beetles. Medicinal, he claims. He shows you how they nibble at dead skin, how their saliva soothes. You're intrigued. The physician is skeptical. Still, he says later, knowledge travels on stranger legs. Historians still argue how much cross-cultural knowledge shared across continents in these times. But clearly, more than people admit. You begin recording your own notes. Little sketches. Which leech prefers which limb? Who latches quickly? Which types of bleeding seem to help grief? Which calm tremors? Which just make people angry? You even write a poem. It's terrible. But when you read it aloud to the jars, you swear the water ripples differently. A child watches you one day and says, "Are they your pets?" You pause. "No," you say. "They're my teachers." One evening, under a slate-gray sky, a horseman arrives bearing the red-laced crest of the High Tribunal, a traveling delegation of healers, priests, and scholars tasked with evaluating medical practices across the realm. Or, in simpler terms, a panel of deeply suspicious men who think too much bloodletting is sorcery and not enough is negligence. They don't knock. The lead examiner, Brother Corwin, steps into the clinic like it's already guilty. His robes smell faintly of dust and lavender, and his gaze lingers on your jars with visible discomfort. You keep them, in glass. Glass is kinder than chains, the physician says, with the air of someone who's been through this dance before. The tribunal wants to observe 3 procedures. Random patients. No prior knowledge. You feel your stomach churn. Not from fear, but from irritation. Still, you prep the room. First comes a young man suffering from fever and headache. He lies curled in a wool blanket, eyes rolling. The tribunal murmurs about hot bile. You nod politely. The physician suggests a forehead bleed, a practice dating back to Galen and beyond. You select Delilah, small, light, and unusually delicate. She latches between the brows. The patient exhales as if the leech pulled the fever through his skull. Brother Corwin frowns. A showy location. Medicine is sometimes theatre, the physician answers dryly. Second patient, a weaver with tremors in both hands, likely from repetitive work and cold winters. You consider a lumbar bleed, an unusual but sometimes effective placement. You pick Agatha and Felix. They attach low on the back, where the muscles seem to twitch constantly. The weaver sighs, and for a few minutes, his hands stop shaking. Temporary, one tribunal member mutters. Perhaps, you reply. But sometimes relief is the goal. The final patient is a nun with ringing in her ears, what future doctors will call tinnitus. For now, it's just the bells. The physician shrugs. We'll try behind the ear. You choose Lorenzo, a plump, agreeable fellow who's partial to soft skin. He finds a spot just behind her lobe and settles in. She giggles. It tickles. The tribunal notes everything. They murmur. They huddle. Historians still debate how fair these tribunals were. Some helped standardize treatment, others simply enforced conformity. This one seems undecided. Finally, Brother Corwin delivers his verdict. Not heretical. Possibly helpful. Mildly unsettling. You beam. I'll take it. They leave without a thank you. That night, the physician offers you the clinic logbook. You've earned it, he says. You see what others don't. You flip through its pages, scrawled notes, illustrations, a few smudges of dried blood. It's beautiful. The days pass. You begin to sense things before they happen. You know when a leech is ready. You can tell if someone needs bleeding, comfort, or just a hot broth and time to cry. One afternoon, an old man returns. You treated him months ago, nosebleeds and night sweats. He hands you a pouch of dried figs. No more nose fountains, he says with a wink. Still scared of the jars, though. You offer to let him pet Marcus. He declines. The clinic takes on a rhythm. You and the physician work without words some days. You reach for a salve as he steps aside. He places a jar in your hand before you've asked. You become part of the ritual. Sometimes, you whisper to the leeches before they bite. Be gentle. Find the bad stuff. Don't embarrass me. Sometimes, they obey. Other times, they float smugly in their jars, refusing to latch, as if reminding you they're still the ones in control. You respect that. One stormy night, a knock rattles the door just past midnight. A stranger stands in the rain, cloaked in black. His eyes are hollow. His hands tremble. "My wife," he rasps. "She's losing herself." You go. Because you always go. She lies beneath quilts, skin pallid, eyes darting as though she's chasing thoughts she can't quite catch. Delirium. The physician tests her pulse. Shallow. He murmurs about blocked energies. A bad harvest. Maybe too much moonlight. You prep one leech, Nina. Quiet, old, and always precise. She's placed just beneath the ribs. The woman sighs. Her hands unclench. Her feet stop twitching. In the hush that follows, the man weeps. "Thank you," he says. "I thought she was already gone." You whisper to Nina later, "You saved her." She floats belly up in the water, full and content. Retired, maybe. Not every story is dramatic. A baker with swollen ankles. A boy with nightmares. A scribe who just wants his joints to stop aching. Sometimes, the leeches don't even feed. They just sit there. Like witnesses. You realize one day, watching the jars flicker in candlelight, that this job, this life, is less about blood and more about attention. You see people. You listen. You sit with their discomfort. The leeches are just part of the translation. The physician retires quietly. Leaves you the key. "You'll do better than I did," he says. You already are. You run the clinic alone now. With help, of course, from a few apprentices who wrinkle their noses and complain about the smell. You smile. You were them once. You keep every empty jar, every dried figure, every badly drawn thank you note. The walls of the clinic are filled with jars and stories, and neither shows signs of stopping. Outside, children dare each other to peek inside. Teenagers come in for made-up illnesses just to see the worms. Some leave with actual treatments. Some just needed someone to care. You sit by the window one evening, watching the sun drop into a field of barley. You hold a jar in your lap. Inside, Clara swims lazily. "Tomorrow," you say softly, "we'll try something new." And Clara, she does a backflip. And now, your breath softens. The world of leeches, jars, old books, and smoky clinics begins to fade behind a gentle curtain of silence. You're no longer walking cobbled streets or squinting at pulses in candlelight. You're simply floating. Like Clara, weightless in her jar. Let your shoulders release whatever they've been holding. All that history, the heavy robes, the urgent knocks, the trembling hands, none of it needs you right now. Not in this moment. Not in this quiet. Feel how your thoughts begin to stretch, slow, untangle. Like ink in warm water. Like soft cloth folding itself for rest. Even the leeches are still now. Drifting in their glass chambers. No biting. No squirming. Just a slow, suspended dance. You're warm. You're safe. You've made it through plagues and tribunals, heartbreaks and healings, all in the quiet rhythm of story. The wind outside might rattle the shutters. A distant dog might bark once. But here, within these words, you're wrapped in calm. The story is done. And now, you don't need to remember any of it. It can drift away, piece by piece, like a dream turning into mist. Let your eyelids grow heavy. There's nothing left to do. The candles are out. The jars are closed. The night is yours now. Sleep well, Leech Wrangler. You've earned it.